Hi, I'm Keith Baker, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about the expert pathway and putting deliberate practice into practice. I first want to give you an early example of deliberate practice in anesthesiology. This paper, published by Cormack and Lehane, was really about developing a practice protocol to deal with difficult grade 3 views at laryngoscopy in pregnant women. The point was they recognized that grade 3 views, shown here, are difficult to intubate, and they are also quite rare. So they had the clever idea of developing a new strategy for learning how to intubate the difficult grade 3 view. So what they proposed in their paper was a form of deliberate practice. They suggested that the anesthesiologist take a standard patient who does not have any airway issues whatsoever and develop the standard grade 1 view that they might get at laryngoscopy, and then purposefully degrade or spoil the view by dropping the laryngoscope handle down and creating their own homemade or iatrogenic grade 3 view, and then practicing intubating this difficult grade 3 view in a way that is safe because there's no airway emergency going on, and it renders the grade 3 view, which is infrequent in real life, as common as you would like, because you can always make a view poor if you chose to do so. So this allows a ready source of the difficult grade 3 view for practice, deliberate practice. Of course, this is difficult, and so sometimes you might fail. And when you're going to first learn how to intubate the famous grade 3 view where you cannot see the vocal cords, you are going to put the tube in the esophagus from time to time, or spend some time getting it in the right place. So there will be failing from time to time. Therefore, one needs to have a learning orientation to cope with this failure and to recognize it as an opportunity for improvement and as standard fare for what you will encounter when you're in the process of attaining expert performance. There is a lot of failure on that pathway. It is often said in medicine that experience will lead to expertise. It turns out that that's not how it works. In fact, a nice editorial was written, "Experience does not equal expertise." And I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. So what we have here is a nice example written by Dr. Anders Ericsson back in the early 2000s, where he showed the typical ways people progress in their careers. Performance is on the y-axis here, and experience is on the x-axis here. Most adults will, over time, improve their performance, and so it goes, until they become very comfortable. This is what he called arrested development right here. Now, there's a very important branch point that one could take here, and they could do something different and focus on expert performance, and that's when you reinvest in your own career development over time and continually improve your performance. That's the routine adoption of deliberate practice into your professional activities. This is a little cartoon I've made to schematize how this might look. When you're new to an activity, you're a novice, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and you can see the little fella here. He's frowning because things are difficult. It takes a lot of time and effort to do this when you're a novice. But after time, you become competent. It actually occurs sufficiently well so that you can be called competent. I draw your attention to these kinetic variables right here. The kinetic variable of novice to competent does depend on a whole lot of variables, one of which is talent, which is to say that people who are inherently more talented at something may actually arrive at competence sooner. But once they reach competence, they will not inherently get better at what they do unless they engage in the following activities shown here. Now, most people, once they've reached the competence, will do things repeatedly again and again and again, and at that point they've reached the magical person known as the experienced non-expert. You notice this person is smiling because it's coming easily to them. They've automated their activities to the point where not so hard anymore. That's the process called automaticity. And here, once this happens, most people rest on their laurels, so to speak, and that's where routine day-to-day activities just stagnate, and you hit a plateau and nothing inherently gets better. Importantly, people who are highly talented will also reach this very spot right here and sit there on their plateau and not get any better unless they decide to reinvest their time and their effort and their cognitive resources back into their performance. And so you can see here, you go from competent to expert by reinvesting your free time and energy, which is displayed here by the fact this person's smiling, finding it easy, reinvesting some of that free time or free cognitive space that you have back into your performance. And you'll see here, this is difficult. We've already pointed out that deliberate practice is effortful, takes time, and oftentimes you will fail at doing what you do because you're learning to improve yourself. And so this is no easy process. However, once you engage in this process over time, you'll pop out the other side as an expert, which has its own reward. This part here is colored red because it's very dangerous. It's very easy to sit on the plateau for days, months, and in most cases for the rest of your career. The green area here, however, is where the money's at in terms of performance improvement. This is the concept of reinvesting in your own performance improvement over time, yielding the outcome you would like, which is expertise. Importantly, when it comes to this decision branch point right here, which I've shown as a little bullseye, the decision is yours as to whether you travel this more common pathway, this is the one that most everybody travels, or whether you reinvest in your own career and travel up this much more steep and perhaps even arduous hill leading to expert performance. There is nobody requiring you to be an expert in medicine. In fact, all that is required is that you are competent. Once you are competent, you're good to go. And so it's a very self-driven activity to achieve or to aspire to expert performance. So this is really a very personal decision as to whether you reinvest your free time and effort back into your career development. So what I'll show you next is an algorithm for when and how you might adopt or put into practice deliberate practice. So in this case, it's going to be related to anesthesiology. So the first question to ask is whether or not the case itself seems complex or difficult. If it's a complex or difficult case, in other words, if it's yes, that's difficult or complex, it is probably not a great case for a deliberate practice. You're going to be sufficiently overwhelmed and busy and stressed out, so to speak, with just managing the case. You don't want to add extra load to your day, so I wouldn't do it there necessarily. On the other hand, if it's a rather routine case and it's not particularly complex or difficult, then you go up this pathway here. Then you would want to choose from your list one or two options, and the key here is you have to develop your own list of what you want to work on. So down here, you're going to keep a list, a running list of things you want to try, work on, try and improve, and so on. And you consult your list, look it over, and decide which things on there are appropriate for the case that you're doing. And one of the key questions you need to ask yourself is whether or not these items are clinically reasonable. If they're not, for whatever reason, then don't do deliberate practice. Take, for example, someone who's coming in for emergency surgery and you want to work on a new form of intubation. Patients coming in for emergency surgery usually need a rapid sequence induction. It has to happen quickly and accurately to get them intubated safely. It is not a good time to practice intubating someone in a clumsy, slow manner with deliberate practice. So that's a real obvious example of where you would not use deliberate practice. But if the activity for practice seems clinically reasonable, now you're saying yes. Then you want to propose your plan to the colleagues you're working with, the attending, so to speak. If they agree, you win. I'd say engage in deliberate practice and try and improve yourself. However, sometimes they will say no. Here you can see that they've said no. When that happens, explore with them, inquire of them what it was that proved to be the barrier to them letting you engage in deliberate practice on this patient. You will hear some interesting things, and what I recommend you do is then think to yourself how you can create a fix for the barrier that they have put up in front of you. Next time, use your fix that you've created and propose a new and improved version of what or how you'll engage in deliberate practice for a much more likely yes when you ask the question, can we do deliberate practice on this patient or with this patient? So that's a suggestion I have for the flow of approaching patients for deliberate practice. Thanks very much for spending some time on the Expert Pathway. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.